We've all had someone do something to us that drove us off the rails, that we got upset with, that we lost our temper, we lost our cool, we were out of control. And many times we look at that, look back at that and think, wow, I wish I didn't do that. What if there was a way that we could deal with things differently? What if there was a way that we could separate how we're reacting from their behavior? How do we do that? Let's take a look.
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello and welcome to an On the Couch episode of the Share.care podcast. Our belief is that global peace starts at home. Feeling safe, valued, and heard gives you a foundation to confidently step out and make the world a happier and safer place for everyone. Because in today's world, it's in your own selfish best interest to help others. Today we're going to talk about people's behaviors and people's identity, both yours and the people around you, and how do we separate people from the behavior? Should we separate people from behaviors? This comes from the negotiation magic course that I teach, but what we need to really understand is that as much as it might look like the case, people are actually not their behavior. They're not what they do. It's similar from not just the external people, but yourself as well. You are not your behavior. For example, if you lose your temper, you're not an angry person. You were angry in that moment. You behaved angrily. That doesn't mean that you're an angry person. You might have some issues. I know I did many, many, many years ago where I had, some pent up anger issues, but that wasn't who I was. I was still a good person. I wanted to do things well. And an example of that was a long time ago. I went to, I was helping at a friend's wedding, and we were at the church, and there was a space out the front for the bridal car to turn up so the bride could get out and walk straight in. And so I'm out at the front of the church helping people, come in and get sorted, that kind of thing. Then someone pulled up and parked where the bridal car was supposed to be, and they got out and they started walking to the church. Now I've got out. Now I'm thinking, well, where's the bride going to park? And that's my intention, going, okay, I need to look after the bride. She's coming. But when I walked over, what I did was I let loose at the guy that was walking in with his partner, wife, I'm not sure. So what the hell are you parking there for? And don't you know the bride's got to park there? And I know I've behaved for when I look back at it now, it's very inappropriately. Certainly not in a way that's going to foster a great outcome. And yes, the person moved the car, so I got the result. They moved the car, and then the bride could pull up, but my relationship with that person wasn't too enhanced by that behavior of mine. But the thing is, that was my behavior. That wasn't who I was. And that's what we want to look at here as we're going through this podcast is, how do we separate that? One, from your own personal perspective, how do you separate your own behaviors from who you are as a person? And also too, when you're dealing with someone, how do you separate those behaviors from the person? Because one of the things that we do personally many times is, if we make a mistake, we'll beat ourselves up because they're going, oh, I made a mistake, and we'll relive that going over and over it again. And that can get us down. And when we understand how our body works too, the chemical operation within our body, it's really important to understand how that impacts on our life and our ability to operate at a high level, to operate at a peak performance level. Because if you're beating yourself up, you're producing a number of chemicals in your body. If you're making, if you're looking at something, you're going, oh, I look at that scenario that I described. If I look back at that and said, oh, I'm a bad person, I shouldn't have done that, which, I shouldn't have. But if I look back at that and I'm beating myself up and go, how could I do that? Why would I do that? And I can feel it now, even as I'm saying that. I'm starting to produce chemicals in my body that's making me feel depressed, sad, and upset. Because it's like, how could I do that? Why would I do that? And I'm doing it deliberately now just to feel that, and it's not a good feeling. Why am I feeling that way? Because there's chemicals in my body that are produced by the way that I'm thinking. How I do think about it is I look back and go, well, my behavior, my intention was good. I'm a good person. My intention was good. So I believe I'm a good person. I always intend to do good things. Doesn't mean I always do good things. It doesn't mean things turn out that way. My intention is, but sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we don't understand the full situation, and we'll say and do things that get consequences that we didn't fully intend, or it might be a circumstance that a whole lot of things have built up. An example of that is you might be having difficulty at work, you might be having difficulty with money, you might have the children not doing the homework, you have a whole bunch of things that build up, and all of a sudden someone says something to you, and that's the last straw. We've all heard of the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, that's the last straw, and all of a sudden you explode. And it wasn't that particular incident that you're exploding at. It was everything else that led up to that. And that's where, from that side of things, you look at it and go, well, you need to recognize that you're a good person. I think there's very, very few people on the planet that fall into that psychopath, sociopath, where they just don't care about other people at all. I think that's few and far between. I haven't met anyone that falls into that category, that I would conclusively say falls into that category. I think most people have a good intention. They want to do good in the world. And I would suggest that you fall into that category, that you are a good person and you want to do good things for the world. So that's the first step, is to recognize that you're a good person. And then you look at the situation and look back at that wedding situation. Well, what was my intention? My intention was to ensure that the bride had a car park when she pulled up, that she didn't have to stroll down the street, that she could pull up right out front of the church, walk straight in the stairs, and go straight in and get married. That's a good intention. That was my intention. Now, as I'm talking to you about that, I'm thinking about that intention, going, well, that was the that felt good. And as I said, as I'm talking to you about it, I'm actually starting to feel good about it. I'm going, yeah, well, that was my intention. I wanted the right thing to happen. Now, I take that a step further and go, well, what was my behavior? Well, my behavior probably wasn't the best. Well, no, probably it wasn't the best. My behavior wasn't the best in addressing that situation. At that time, that was the best that I knew how at that time, because that's what I did. And which is another belief which I would suggest to take on, is that in any given moment, you've done the best that you knew how. And when I say that, what I mean is we need to separate conscious understanding from unconscious behavior. Because to do something, you operate from an unconscious level. If you were to pick up a cup off the table, you're not thinking about all the muscles that you need to move to pick that up. You're going through a process. Your unconscious mind is going through all that, going move this muscle, all that sort of thing. All you're thinking about is picking up the cup. And that's an unconscious behavior. Consciously, there's too many things to think about. And that's how we operate in our life. And you might have had that experience where you thought you understood something. You consciously thought you understood something. And you went and did it and found out that you couldn't do it as well as you thought you could. You fall on your face or whatever happened. And you've gone, oh, I didn't understand as well as I thought I should, or I thought I did. And then you probably also had the opposite experience of where you didn't think you understood something and surprised yourself of how well you did, which highlights the point that I'm making, is that consciously we need to understand things. So consciously we understand, unconsciously we act. And that's when you're looking at, okay, in any given moment, you've done the best you could. Now, consciously you might look back and go, well, I knew better. Well, yeah, maybe at a conscious level. but did you know better at an unconscious level? And I would suggest that you didn't. I know from my perspective, there's been many times where consciously I knew how to, what was the thing to do, but when I've gone and done it, I didn't perform that well because I didn't understand it unconsciously, I should say. And that's where you need to separate those two. So when I look back at things, it's like, well, when I look at any given moment, I've done the best that I knew how as a whole person, not consciously, but as a whole person. And that's where that belief set, when I look back at that point in time using that wedding example, was it a great behavior? No, it wasn't. Was it the best I knew how to? Well, yes, because it certainly is not. And as a person, it was not my intention to create a rift between me and the person that had parked there. That wasn't my intention. I didn't even think about that. And that's part of my understanding. There's so many things in dealing with situations. You move so many muscles to pick up a cup off the table. Think about that scenario. There were so many different things to do to deal with. My focus, my sole focus was, make sure that parking spot's empty. I wasn't consciously thinking about, whether the person felt good about me telling them to move their car. That wasn't part of my awareness. Wasn't what I knew at that point in time. So I can look back at that and go, well, okay, I at that moment I did the best I could. Hindsight's always 2020. You can look back and go, yep, there's a whole bunch of things there. In the moment, you can only act with what you have, and that's why I really believe having that belief set of in any given moment you've done the best you could serves you really well, because you can look back as a impartial third person and go, okay, maybe that behavior wasn't so great. And from that, I've adopted different behaviors now in those situations where I really focus on, what does the other person feel from my interactions with them? And I make sure a lot of time that is a primary focus of mine. I've got the objective I want to achieve. If that same circumstance had occurred again now, I would look at that and go, okay, this person's parked in there, and I'd say, look, I'd walk over calmly and say, look, hi, I'm Damien. I'm here to help the bride and the wedding, make sure everything goes smoothly. Just to let you know that the spot that you've parked in is where the bride needs to park so she can come in. Would you mind moving and parking your car somewhere else? Something polite like that. And it would get a completely different response. But I can look back with hindsight and understand that is now part of my intention. My intention was always good, but my intention is not only to make sure that the bride has clear access to the church, but also to facilitate conversation in a way, or facilitate the whole lot so everybody feels the best that they can, which is a different scenario now that I'm working towards. And that's, again, and before, as I mentioned at the start of this podcast, when I was thinking about going, my behavior was bad, and starting to say that, I started to produce the chemicals in my body that made me feel bad. But talking about it in the way that I talked about just then, saying, okay, what I've done is, my intention was good. I've got something to learn from that, and from that I can have a good intention. This is how can I adjust and do it differently in the future. I feel good about that. I'm producing chemicals in my body producing dopamine and serotonin as I'm saying that makes me feel really good. And that's where it's really important to separate those two. Your person, your identity, who you are, needs to be very different from the behaviors that you do. And one way you can do that is, or one way I've done that is, I have my own personal mission statement, which defines who I am. And it has, my personal mission statement is to enjoy life and share in the joy of others, to learn something daily that helps me overachieve, and to confidently and compassionately act from my values of honesty, excellence, and understanding. And that guides me. And as you can see, I just recited that off the top of my head. It's ingrained unconsciously in my psyche that that's how I will behave. And that's what drives me. So I know from my perspective that I'm a good person. Now, some of my behaviors in circumstances, going to be many circumstances, because I'm always trying new things, where I'm not going to perform as well as I could. No matter how much I study something, or how much anybody studies something, you can understand it consciously, and we talked about that. Behavior is different. So when you actually get in that circumstance, it's one of those things. I remember, I perform, doing public speaking, for example, and I remember I used to do a lot of speaking in courtrooms, and well, at the time it was online uh, because of COVID, those kind of things. And I was quite confident in speaking in those environments, and I'd get up and I'd speak. And then when the courts opened up again, I had to go in there and speak in person. Now I was very confident in my ability, and I performed very well speaking online and clearly articulating that. But then I moved into a different environment, and all of a sudden, wham! I didn't perform as well. Courtrooms are very intimidating in person, and it was very interesting when I first went in person. I walked in thinking, "Yep, this is going to be easy. Can handle it consciously." I knew what I was doing, but I wasn't used to the environment. And all of a sudden, I just stumbled all over myself. Wasn't able to put together things very well at all. And I took that away. I didn't beat myself. I went, "Wow, that was interesting." I don't. I didn't look at it and go, I'm terrible at doing this in person. It was okay. I need to adjust how I'm doing it. I believe I'm a confident person, and confidence isn't something that you have. It's not a. It's Confidence is not something you can just pick up. It's not something. Confidence is a behavior. It's something that you do. You don't have to have a lot of skill to be confident. That's a topic of another podcast. But what I did is, as soon as I walked out of that courtroom, went, okay, what I need to do now is recognize that scenario. So I replayed it in my head. I went, okay, this is what I did. This is how I reacted. How would I do it differently? So again, I separated myself from the behavior. I wasn't bad at speaking in court. I just hadn't learned the skills, and I went through it over and over again in my head. The very next time that I walked in, I took the time. I slowed down. I was very clear in what I said, and it worked really, really well. And it was one change. It didn't have to go through lots and lots of, practice. Well, in my head I did, but I didn't have to go to court over and over and over again to get that. I just readjusted in my head. So I separated my ability, my conscious, my conscious understanding of my ability, my conscious understanding of the scenario. I took that in, I processed it, I played it out as to what I needed to do, allowed that, and I was calm about it too, which is really, if you want to learn at an unconscious level, you need to be calm about it, because otherwise, if you tense it, it just doesn't sink in. And I adjusted that, and I performed really well. And this is the same token with yourself as it is with other people. When dealing with other people, it's important. I believe it's important anyway. For me, I think most people have good intentions, as I said before. And when someone does something that really, might annoy me, and I go, "Oh, that's really frustrating," I stop and I go, "Take a breath." Always good to take a breath before you react. Take one thing to take away from this podcast. If that's the only thing you take away from this podcast, is to take a breath before you react. And so I have that same attitude towards other people as I do towards myself. Is one, I believe the person's a good is a good person. I believe their intention is good. It may not be expressed very well, but I believe that their intention is very good. And I want to understand what is it they're trying to achieve, what's their objective. So I take a breath, and then, if that gives you that space to relax a little bit, because you're not reacting from, your primal part of your brain. If we do trigger quite easily. Well, we can be. If you haven't learned how not to, you can be triggered very easily, which is not a great place to be able to be manipulated by people. And we do that. And I mentioned the negotiation magic course. Part of that is to try and elicit emotional responses. That one of the sources of power is being able to um, elicit emotional responses from people. And if you don't have good control over your emotions, someone's going to walk the floor with you. That's just the way. If you cannot control how you react, someone will be in control of you. And that's where, from that perspective, you use the same thing. Well, okay, that person's done that. I'm having a reaction to that. What does that mean? An example of that was one time when I was working on a construction site. I was there was managing the site. It was a 22 story building, and I was managing all the commercial side of things and dealing with that. And the supervisor for the client was an elderly gentleman, and he um, he was always a little bit sort of, he liked to antagonize things, and that was just his way. Um, and I remember one day, because I always wore a suit, and and at the time I was wearing braces as well, so the 80s style braces, Gordon Gecko type thing. Uh, and I was there on site, and we were talking, and he was standing in front of me, and I didn't have my jacket on, so my braces were there. And he grabbed hold of my braces and just flicked it as we were talking, which is, it's quite a rude thing to do. And I was like, ooh, okay. And I didn't react. I internally I did, but I kind of just let it go and continued the conversation. And as we were talking, and then after we talked for probably about a minute or so, and then he turned to me, he goes, you know what? I love, the braces. They look really cool. I'd just love to have the courage to wear it, because it wasn't, the fashion at that time. It was fashion in the 80s, and they look cool, I think, my opinion. Um, and he obviously thought they looked cool, but he wasn't brave enough to do it. And had I reacted, had I go, how dare you touch me, or whatever. And I'm not saying don't let people touch you. That's a different scenario. The circumstance was what it was. He certainly wasn't threatening me in any, well, I didn't feel threatened anyway. I don't think he was threatening me in any way. He was just, that was his behavior. That was the way he was trying to elicit a response. And I wasn't going to be controlled by that. So I let it go. We finished our conversation. Then he brought up, and he brought it up. He said, hey, I really think your braces look cool, and I wish I had the guts to wear them, was his comment. And from that, we continued to have a great relationship, because I didn't react. I didn't go for his jibes. His jibes were to get the reaction. And I find that often too with people in that scenario where they are looking for a reaction, and for you to, and they're doing something which could be considered slightly mean, and there's a couple of times there where the same gentleman, in meetings, he made some comments which I thought were inappropriate, but I didn't say anything about it because I didn't feel it was, it was inappropriate for the circumstance, but it wasn't really something that needed to be worried about, so I let it go. And what I've noticed with those kind of scenarios is that often the people, if you don't react, they'll process it, and then they'll start to feel bad about that. Because I believe people are genuinely good people. So if they send out a barb, and you just let it go past, don't react, they realize, that it'll play on their mind that they've done something that probably wasn't, a nice thing to do, and that'll come back to serve you later, which was my experience in that. But it's separating that, and the reason it comes back is because they are good people. They recognize that they've done something, their behavior wasn't great, and they'll address that. And that's where, putting fuel on a fire, as we know, it's obvious it's going to make the fire bigger. So when someone does something, in that scenario, it can be really easy to just react and escalate a situation. But if you take a step back and go, okay, firstly, unconsciously, you've got to train yourself. People are good people. Majority of people are good people. They have good intentions. Like, okay, this is a good person. They've got good intentions. If you can get that to an unconscious state where you're not, your unconscious is not going, oh my God, I got to defend myself. It's like, okay, they're a good person there, and this all happens in an instant if it's from unconscious part of your mind. Is, instantly you go, good person, good intention, not coming across that way. What's going on here? And that happens in an instant. You don't react. You go, okay, and then you ask another question. Well, what do you mean by that? Or what are you trying to achieve here? I'm curious to know what's going on. Those kind of things. Not why is a bad question. Yeah, why is really poor question. Don't stay away from why questions. What's going on? I don't understand what you're trying to achieve. Those kind of things. Can you explain to me a bit more of what you want to achieve? Those kind of questions are really helpful to diffusing situations. But most of all, the first step is having your own self-control, which is said, if you teach yourself to be at an unconscious level, to at an unconscious level, you are reacting from the perspective of this person is a good person, they have good intentions, the behavior is different, and it's not congruent with what they're trying to achieve, and then I need to find out what they're trying to achieve. If you can get that at an unconscious level, similar to when you pick up a cup, all of a sudden you'll immediately just react differently when someone sends out those barbs or behaves in a way. Even they might not be deliberately doing it in a way. They just might be doing something without realizing what they're doing. That just might be the way they behave. And this is, I mean, this can people that have separated or broken up with a partner or something like that, it's a highly emotional situation, and often you'll get to that situation where those behaviors where you're going, that person's a real bastard, or she's a bitch, and you have all these different reactions because they go, oh, that, and it's all emotional, and we tend to say that person, that is was saying before, he's a bastard or she's a bitch, or but it's their behavior. And that's, when we separate that out, we can react differently and go, okay, I didn't like that behavior. Obviously, you like the person. I mean, that's pretty obvious. If you were in a relationship with them, you like that person. Otherwise, you wouldn't have got into a relationship in the first place. Might have had some behaviors that you didn't recognize at the start, and those behaviors have come out, and now you don't like that, which is fair enough. You don't have to like everything about a person, but to say the person is a bad person and then you get all upset about that, that doesn't serve you very well. And it's the same thing, with can be partner, even in a relationship when you with a partner and they're doing something that's annoying, or you're annoyed with, should be the better way of putting that, is to go, well, what are their intention with this? What are they trying to do? I'm with them, so I must like them. What's going on here? And have that discussion rather than reacting. Um, and it's really important from that perspective, whether it applies to partner, ex-partner, children, friends, associates, business people, acknowledging that the person is different from the behavior, and first having that first thought of understanding that this person is a good person, they have good intentions. I might not understand what it is, and that behavior might be driving me up the wall, but if I believe they're a good person and good intentions, then I can change the situation. I can change the cycle. Rather than doing a behavior, I react, it escalates, we all go away, and you have a person that walks in a huff back to their car to move it so the bride can park there. It can be a different scenario. So it's important to accept the person is a good person. Believe that the person is a good person. If you meet someone that's not, and said, I believe they're rare, then that would be a case of stay away from them. That's a simple way of dealing with that. Um, and so believe that they're a good person is a start. And you need to get that to it's an unconscious. If you can get it so it's unconscious, so it's from the point of view that where everybody you meet, you go, well, they've got good intentions. They've got good intentions. They're a good person. They've got good intentions. If everyone you meet, you're approaching it from that perspective, it's an unconscious reaction. Then you don't have to think about it, just like you don't think about picking up a cup of tea. And then so we're looking at, okay, we're accepting the person, and we might not like the behavior, so you've already disassociated from reacting. Now you can make an inquiry and go, well, okay, what is it? What are they trying to achieve? What is their intention? So you can operate from the perspective of a better understanding or finding out more information rather than just reacting. The other thing is, when you do that, you're able to find out what that positive intention is. So you can appreciate, okay, they've got a positive intention. What is that positive intention? And when you understand that, you can have the discussion with it of how to fulfill that. How do we fulfill, then how do we address this? And it's about communication at the end of the day. If you can communicate effectively with someone, you can find out what's going on from them. Why are they, what is the reason they're behaving the way they're behaving, so that then you can understand what that intention is and not react in an explosive way that's not going to serve you.
Thank you for being part of the Share.Care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.